Usually, I got dressed up, baked my famous cornbread, and waited by the window like I did every year. But this Thanksgiving, nobody came. Hours later, I saw the photos. My family had a full dinner without me. They didn't forget me. They excluded me on purpose. So I posted the truth. Before I begin my story, I just want to say thank you for listening to me pour my heart out. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I love hearing from you. And if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button. It helps me more than you know. Now, let me tell you what really happened. I woke up early that Thanksgiving morning, same as always. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, and the cold had crept into the corners of my little house. I shuffled to the kitchen, wrapped in my old cardigan, and turned on the coffee maker. I'd already baked the cornbread the night before. It was cooling on the counter beside the butter dish, just like every year. Sandra always made the turkey, David handled the drinks, Marcus managed the music, and me, I brought the cornbread. That was my place. My quiet, reliable role at the Thompson Thanksgiving table. Only this year, something felt off. I hadn't heard from David in 3 days. No, just checking in, Dad, no final details on when he'd swing by to pick me up. I wasn't too worried at first. My son was forgetful, but not cruel. I told myself he was just busy with preparations, running around trying to please Sandra as usual. But still, a little voice in the back of my head started whispering things I didn't want to hear. I brushed it off and stayed busy. I dressed slowly, carefully, put on my navy blazer, the one David always said made me look distinguished. I pinned my American Legion pin to my chest, combed what was left of my gray hair, and gave myself a quiet nod in the mirror. You still got it, Harold. Then I sat by the window. I waited and waited. I watched leaves swirl in the yard. Watched a neighbor's grandkids run down the sidewalk with foil pans and ribbon-wrapped boxes. Around 11:30, I reheated some coffee. By 1 o'clock, I poured it out. My phone sat on the side table face up. No messages, no missed calls, not even a text that said, running late. By 3 o'clock, the cornbread had cooled to room temperature and my fingers had stopped refreshing the call log. I called David once. It rang twice, then went straight to voicemail. I didn't leave one. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table and did what I'd spent a lifetime learning to do. I made peace with the quiet. I fixed myself a small plate, some leftover green beans, a slice of ham, and a scoop of stuffing from the night before. I lit a candle out of habit and placed it on the table beside the cornbread. I whispered grace under my breath and tried not to taste the bitterness behind the salt. By 5 p.m., I'd given up pretending. I opened my phone and scrolled through Facebook. That was my first mistake. The first photo I saw was Sandra smiling wide with her arm wrapped around David, standing in front of a perfectly golden turkey on her polished dining table. The caption read, "So thankful for this beautiful life and our beautiful people. #grateful #family first." There were dozens of likes already. The comments rolled in fast. Such a gorgeous table. Where's Papa Thompson? Harold didn't make the cornbread this year. I blinked at the screen. My hands trembled as I clicked through the photos. There was Marcus holding a glass of cider, laughing with cousins I hadn't seen since Easter. There was David carving the turkey. There was Sandra holding the bread basket I'd given her last Christmas, filled with someone else's rolls. But no one mentioned me. Not once. Not a single chair at that long table was empty. They hadn't just forgotten me. They'd planned a meal where I didn't belong. My chest felt tight. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. I stared at the photo, trying to find a mistake. A sign that maybe I'd been invited and somehow missed it. But there it was, clear, cruel, and smiling right back at me. A Thanksgiving I wasn't part of, lived out in high definition. My thumb hovered over the like button. I didn't press it. Instead, I set the phone down gently, stood up, and walked to the window. I looked out at the street again. It was dark now. The porch lights on every house glowed soft yellow, and I could hear faint laughter from 2 doors down. I felt like a ghost in my own life, floating in a room no one remembered, breathing in a space no one made for me. I wrapped up the cornbread in foil and slid it into the fridge. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat down again, alone. The candle flickered low beside me. My hand reached for my phone again, not to scroll, not to call, but to reread the last message I'd sent David the week before. Let me know what time you'll be coming by to pick me up. I've got the cornbread ready. It had been left unread. That's when the tears came. Not loud, not violent, just soft and steady. They rolled down my cheeks as I folded my napkin and placed it on my empty plate. It was the first time I'd ever eaten Thanksgiving dinner alone, and I knew it would be the last time I stayed quiet about it. I woke up the next morning, still in my blazer. I must have fallen asleep in the armchair, phone still resting in my lap. The candle had burned down to a stub. The room smelled faintly of cornbread and cold disappointment, and my back ached in that sharp, familiar way it always did after sitting too long without support. I reached for my phone, not because I expected a message, but because habit is hard to break after 78 years. Still no calls, no texts. Nothing from David, nothing from Marcus. Not even one of those too light-hearted emojis Sandra likes to send when she's avoiding responsibility. The kind that says, "Oops, we forgot," like it's a joke instead of a knife in your side. I opened Facebook again. Their post had picked up even more likes overnight. Over 100 now, dozens of comments. Sandra had even replied to a few, thanking people for their compliments on their spread. I stared at her smile in those photos. It wasn't just joy, it was triumph, like she finally had her perfect holiday, polished and curated without the old man she called extra baggage dragging it down. That's when I noticed something strange. Marcus had tagged me. It must have been accidental, some careless click while uploading a photo, but there it was, a blue hyperlink under the family photo with Harold Thompson. I clicked it, half hoping it was something else, some different post or maybe even a message. Instead, it opened a thread. A long one. It wasn't public. It was part of a private family group Sandra had created. I'd never been added before. Apparently, Marcus's tag had triggered something that gave me temporary access. And in that moment, whether by grace, accident, or divine timing, I saw everything. The thread started 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. Sandra, are we seriously inviting Harold again this year? I'm not dealing with his war stories over the table. He brings the mood down and it takes forever for him to get in and out of the car. David, he's my dad, Sandra. Sandra, and I'm your wife. Pick a struggle. Marcus, no reply. Another message from Sandra, let's just keep it between us this year. He won't make a fuss. Tell him dinner's cancelled or something. He'll stay home and do his little veteran thing. Post a pic of the cornbread if he asks. David replied with a thumbs up emoji. That was the one that hurt the most. Not the insults. Not even the exclusion. It was that little yellow icon. Lazy, silent, and complicit. There were more messages. Jokes about me falling asleep at the table last year, complaints about my stories. Sandra wrote that she can't stand the smell of Old Spice and mothballs. David laughed. Marcus didn't say a word. No defense, no protest. Just liked the comment here and there and sent a gif of someone rolling their eyes when Sandra said I was ruining the aesthetic. I sat in silence as I read. Each message was like a paper cut, shallow on its own, but together they bled. It wasn't just that they didn't invite me. It was that they didn't want me there. They'd planned a family holiday and intentionally cut out the man who raised it all. The man who worked 3 jobs to pay for David's college when his mother died. The man who co-signed the loan for Sandra's little boutique. The man who drove Marcus to baseball practice every day for 6 years when Sandra was too busy. I looked around my living room. There were framed photos on every wall. Photos of their birthdays, their graduations, their weddings and holidays, all with me in the background, smiling, cooking, holding someone's child, offering someone a drink. I wasn't the centerpiece. I was the support beam. And now they'd torn me out of the foundation like I was a weed. That night, I opened the small safe in my bedroom. Inside was a sealed envelope labeled Christmas. I had written it by hand 2 months earlier. Inside was a letter to David and Marcus, along with a notarized copy of my original will. This was my surprise. My plan. After years of pinching pennies, saving birthday checks instead of cashing them, and quietly selling off tools I never used, I had amassed more than they suspected. My house was paid off. My retirement accounts were healthy. I'd even invested in a few bonds my bank advisor had recommended years ago. It wasn't generational wealth, but it was enough to change their lives. I'd planned to give them everything, to leave David the house, to set up a trust for Marcus's future. Even Sandra, God help me. I had written her into the document for a portion of the savings. I thought maybe it would soften her over time, make her feel included. But now I knew better. I placed the envelope on the table. I stared at it for a long time. Then I took a pair of scissors from the drawer and cut it down the middle. Right through the word Thompson. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was clear. I picked up the phone and called Robert Martinez, my lawyer. He answered on the second ring. Harold, happy Thanksgiving. Wait, is everything all right? I need to rewrite my will, I said. There was a pause. Tonight? Tonight. Okay, he said calmly. I'll come to you first thing in the morning. I sat back in my chair and stared at the pieces of the envelope scattered across the table. It felt good. Not because I was petty, but because I was finally done pretending that loyalty should be unconditional. They could have had everything. Now they were going to see what it meant to have nothing. Robert arrived the next morning exactly at 9 a.m. sharp. He'd always been punctual. Back when he was just starting out, he used to do pro bono work at the Veterans Center on weekends while other lawyers were playing golf. Now here he was, a successful attorney, walking into my home with a briefcase and an expression I can only describe as fierce compassion. I brought coffee, he said, handing me a cup. Thought you might need it more than me. I smiled, even though I hadn't slept much. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I once taught David how to tie his shoes, where I bandaged his scraped knees, where I took calls late into the night after his mother passed away. The same table they had all forgotten. Robert opened his case and pulled out a blank will. You're sure? He asked, his voice gentle. I looked him dead in the eye. I was going to change their lives. Now I'm going to protect someone else's. He nodded and didn't press further. We went over everything. Line by line, I struck through David's name. Removed Sandra entirely. Marcus, I hesitated on his name for a second, but he'd stayed silent when it mattered most. He lost his place too. In their place, I named the Veterans Heritage Foundation, a local nonprofit that provided housing and support to elderly veterans left behind by their families. I'd been quietly donating to them for years. Now I was giving them everything. The house, the bonds, the savings, all of it. Robert had brought the necessary witnesses, my neighbor Earl and the young mail carrier from down the road. They signed where needed and left without asking questions. It was done in under an hour. My life's work, legally reassigned. I felt lighter afterward. Not happy, not vindicated, just unburdened. Robert reached for his coat. What will you do now? He asked. I looked down at my folded hands. I think I'll tell the truth. That evening, I opened Facebook again. The post was still there. Sandra smiling beside my son. Marcus holding a glass up in a toast. The comments were still pouring in. Beautiful family. Goals. So much love in these photos. I stared at those words for a long time, the back of my throat tight. Beautiful. Love. Family. Words that had lost their meaning in my world. I clicked, create post. I didn't type anything yet. Just stared at the blinking cursor. Then I picked up my phone and opened the screenshots I had saved. The group chat messages, the jokes, the lies, the decision to exclude me. I uploaded them one by one. Then I went to my photo gallery. I selected the photo I had taken of myself the night before. Me sitting alone at the table. One plate, a single flickering candle, the cornbread untouched behind me, my face quiet, not crying, not bitter, just still. I posted it all in the Thompson family Facebook group, not my personal wall, but the private group where Sandra curated perfection, where they posted vacation updates, birthday photos, and smiling group shots in matching sweaters. Then I wrote, this was my Thanksgiving. I waited by the window. I baked the cornbread. I dressed up. No one came. I was going to surprise you all next month. I'd written a letter, prepared documents, made plans to pass along everything I worked for, the house, the savings, the future. But you made it clear. I'm not family anymore. I've updated the will. I won't be a burden in your photos, your dinners, or your legacy. But I will be remembered. Just not by you. I didn't hit send right away. I read it over 3 times. Then I hit post. I set the phone down and went to the porch. The sky was pink-orange, the trees rustling with late fall wind. And for the first time in days, I let myself smile just a little. It didn't take long. 10 minutes later, my phone started buzzing. Notifications, dozens, then hundreds. Cousins commenting, what is this? Old friends messaging me, shocked. Distant relatives asking why they hadn't heard from me in so long. The photo began circulating beyond the group. Someone had screenshotted it and posted it to their own page with the caption, this is heartbreaking. Be better to your elders. By the end of the night, the post had been shared over 1,000 times. The comments were relentless. I can't believe they did this to you. You deserve better. You're not alone. We see you. But the ones that hit hardest came from within the family. Cousin Betty wrote, David, is this true? Uncle Frank, I was just talking to Harold last week. He was so excited for Thanksgiving. I'm sick over this. And then there was one from David himself, this wasn't how it looks. There's a lot going on. Please, can we talk privately? I didn't reply. Because the truth wasn't private anymore. They posted their Thanksgiving. I posted mine. And now the world could see the difference. The next morning, I woke up to a phone that wouldn't stop buzzing. It was still early, not even 7 a.m., and the sun hadn't broken through the blinds yet, but my notifications had multiplied overnight. My fingers trembled slightly as I picked it up. I expected maybe a few more comments, maybe 1 or 2 friends checking in. I had no idea. The post had been shared nearly 3,000 times. I wasn't just viral within my family group anymore. It had spread. People I didn't know were reposting my picture, my story, my words. Some called me brave. Others called the family disgraceful. Men were writing from other states, other countries even, saying, you spoke for all of us. The hashtags had taken on a life of their own, hashtag forgotten on Thanksgiving, hashtag elder shame, hashtag Team Harold. And right in the middle of it all was my quiet face at that lonely table, a single candle flickering beside a plate that hadn't been touched. That one image had done what 78 years of loyalty hadn't, it made people see me. By midday, the Thompson family Facebook group was chaos. Dozens of new posts flooded in from extended cousins and distant relatives who had either seen the post firsthand or heard about it through the grapevine. Uncle Frank posted a long, blistering note, "I'm ashamed. Harold is my brother-in-law and one of the most decent men I know. To exclude him like this on a day meant for gratitude is vile. I raised David better than this. Sandra, I don't know you well, but I know what this says about you." Sandra tried to reply. Of course she did. She wrote something like, "There's always two sides. We didn't mean for things to be hurtful. Thanksgiving was very hectic this year, and communication got lost in the shuffle." I almost laughed. Lost in the shuffle. That's what she called it. Like forgetting to pick up napkins or overcooking the stuffing, not deliberately excluding the patriarch of the family while mocking him in a group chat. But she wasn't prepared for what came next. Marcus commented. "Not just a like, not just, sorry, Grandpa." No, he posted a full paragraph. I was wrong. I saw the messages. I didn't say anything. I thought staying quiet was better than making things worse. But silence is a choice too, and I made the wrong one. I'm sorry, Grandpa. I really, truly am. I read it 3 times. It didn't undo anything, but it said more than David had. Speaking of David, he called twice. I let the first one go to voicemail, then the second. By the third, I finally picked up, not out of curiosity, but because I wanted to hear how far he'd fallen in the span of 48 hours. His voice was low, tight. "Dad," he said. "What are you doing?" "Eating lunch," I replied. He sighed. "You know what I mean." I didn't answer. "Look, it got out of hand. The post. People are sharing it everywhere. I've got coworkers asking me what happened. Sandra's crying. Marcus won't even come out of his room. You've made your point, okay?" My voice stayed steady. "No," I said. "My point wasn't just for you. It was for everyone who thinks people like me won't speak up. People are turning on us. They should." He didn't respond. So I gave him the one truth he hadn't heard yet. "I was going to leave you everything, David. The house, the accounts, the savings. I had the letter ready, sealed with your name on it." He stammered. "Wait, what?" "I changed it. The night I ate alone. I called Robert. Signed it all over to the Veterans Heritage Foundation." "Dad, come on." I raised my voice slightly, just enough to stop him. I was alone. Not because I forgot to reach out, but because my own child told his wife I ruined the aesthetic. "You left me out like a stain on your carpet, and now you want to clean it up with guilt." "No, sir. I'm not your shame sponge." He was quiet for a long time. Then he whispered, "You really gave it all away?" "Yes." He hung up. No goodbye, just silence. And that silence, that was the sound of everything shifting. By the end of the week, I had 5 invitations from local news outlets asking for interviews. I declined them all. I didn't need cameras or microphones. I had already said what I needed to say. Instead, I went down to the Veterans Heritage Foundation and handed them the first formal check from the new trust. The executive director, a woman named Patricia, hugged me so tight I thought I might break. "You don't know how many veterans this is going to help," she said. I smiled. "I do," I told her. Later that evening, I posted one final message to the family group. "To those who called, messaged, or simply said nothing, this will be my last post here. I won't be attending Christmas, nor will I respond to further questions. My legacy now lives somewhere else. You had your chance to build something with me. Instead, you built something around me, and now I've stepped out of it permanently." I logged out after that. I sat down with a warm cup of coffee and looked out the window at the cold, gray sky. The candle I'd lit on Thanksgiving night was long gone, but I'd replaced it with a new one. Bright blue, unlit, waiting. Not for them. For me. I thought they might let it go. After all the posts, the outrage, and the silence that followed my final message, I assumed they'd stay quiet, that David and Sandra would retreat, lick their wounds in private, and let the embarrassment pass like a storm they didn't want to admit they caused. But they didn't. That following weekend, I heard a knock on the door. Not soft, not tentative, a hard, full-palm thump, like someone trying to shake an apology loose by force. I didn't move from the couch. Another knock. I peeked through the side window. It was David, alone. No Sandra, no Marcus. He was holding something in his hand. Looked like a plastic grocery bag. My guess, cornbread or leftover turkey, some symbolic peace offering that had nothing to do with remorse and everything to do with image. I didn't answer. He knocked again, this time calling my name. Dad, please. I stared at the door like it was a wall. I just want to talk. I didn't move. He tried once more. Dad, come on. This is getting ridiculous. I almost laughed. Ridiculous? That word? The same one Sandra used when I once told her I didn't want Marcus drinking at age 16. The same tone David used when I asked if they'd come over for Easter and he said, "We're not doing holidays like that anymore." Now, suddenly, my silence was the problem. He left after 10 minutes. No note, no voicemail, no groceries left behind, just a puff of exhaust as his car disappeared down the street. I sat in my chair and waited, just to be sure he was really gone. Later that afternoon, Marcus sent a message. It wasn't short this time. It started with, "Grandpa, I know I don't deserve to be forgiven." He apologized for staying quiet, for laughing at the jokes, for not standing up when he should have. He said Sandra and David were fighting, that the house was tense, that he'd cried every day since Thanksgiving. Then came the part that stuck, "I miss you. I miss sitting in your garage while you worked on things. I miss your stories. I miss how you always made room for everyone." It was a lovely letter, but it came after silence, after betrayal, after all the wrong people felt the heat of being exposed. I didn't reply right away. Not because I didn't feel something, I did. But I'd spent too many years being the soft place for others to land, being the one who made room while no one made room for me. Now I was making room for myself. The next morning, Robert dropped by. He handed me a folder with finalized documents for the Harold Thompson Veterans Fund. My signature notarized, my house officially donated as part of the trust. The foundation would take ownership the following spring with plans to expand their residential housing for senior veterans who'd been displaced by their families. "You just built a future for veterans you'll never even meet," Robert said as he closed the folder. I didn't smile. I just nodded. That night, I lit the blue candle I'd saved. I didn't need a holiday. I didn't need a reason. I just wanted to sit in my own living room, sip warm coffee, and feel what it was like to be in full control of my story. No lies, no performance, just me and the kind of quiet that finally felt earned. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Sandra. A message. "Not long, we should have done better. I'm sorry." I read it twice. The second time I noticed the lack of punctuation. No emotion in the delivery, just a flat sentence that said everything and nothing at once. I didn't respond. 2 days later, Marcus tried again. "Grandpa, I know I can't undo what happened. But can I come see you? Just for a minute?" That one I sat with for a while. I even drafted a response, but I never sent it. Because sometimes silence is the clearest boundary a man can draw, and I'd spent too much of my life drawing soft lines in sand that others stepped over like they weren't even there. Instead, I pulled out the thank you letters the foundation had mailed me. There were 11 of them, all handwritten, veterans with names I didn't know, stories I hadn't lived, and pain I understood. One wrote, You gave me a roof when my own son said I was too expensive to care for. Another, this is the first Christmas I've had in 10 years where I feel safe. And one simply said, you reminded me I'm not forgotten. I folded them carefully and placed them in a box with my Bible and old discharge papers. Things worth saving. Later that night, I opened Facebook one last time just to check. The family group was still there, but quiet now. No new posts, no new photos, no Thanksgiving updates. The last post was still mine, still pinned, still shared, still burning quietly in the center of their curated little world. I clicked the Leave Group button. It asked, are you sure? I clicked yes. I didn't need to watch the aftermath anymore. Let them clean it up. Let them rebuild without me. The next morning, I walked into town with my jacket zipped tight against the wind and my heart lighter than it had felt in years. I passed the boutique where Sandra worked, but I didn't glance through the window. I wasn't interested in watching people pretend. I stopped at the foundation instead, dropped off a coffee cake I'd baked the night before. Patricia hugged me and said, you're always welcome here. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. I used to believe legacy meant blood. That what we built, what we saved, what we sacrificed, all of it should go to our children no matter what. That family by default deserved everything. But after that Thanksgiving, I stopped believing that. Legacy isn't about who shares your last name. It's about who shows up when no one's watching. It's about who pulls up a chair before you have to ask, who calls before you're forgotten, who checks in, not for holidays or hashtags, but because your silence matters to them. Took me 78 years to learn that. I wish I'd learned it sooner. The days after I left the Thompson family Facebook group passed quietly. No drama, no more knocks on the door, no more messages from David or Sandra, not even Marcus. I think they finally understood. Or maybe they just gave up trying. Either way, I didn't miss them. I'd already found something better. The director at the Veterans Heritage Foundation asked if I wanted to speak at their annual winter dinner. Just a few words to the veterans staying there, some of whom had been through things even I couldn't imagine. Abandonment, eviction, silence that stretched for decades. I said yes. I wore a simple gray suit and the tie Marcus had given me for my birthday years ago. I remember Sandra saying it was too formal. But that night, standing in a room full of men who had survived the same kind of heartbreak I'd tasted, it felt just right. I told them my story briefly, not to take up space, but to remind them they weren't alone. I thought I'd grow old in the arms of the people I raised, I said. Instead, I grew wise in their absence. They clapped. Some cried. One man shook my hand afterward and whispered, my daughter sent me away when I got cancer. You helped me stop blaming myself. That handshake meant more to me than any Christmas toast my family could have faked. Later that night, Patricia showed me a room at the foundation they'd named in my honor. The Herald Room, a plaque read. A space for veterans to rest, reset, and feel safe, especially grandfathers who have nowhere to go. I stood in the doorway for a long time, my hand over my chest. I had given them the house I once planned to leave to my son. And for the first time in my life, I felt like it had gone exactly where it belonged. I posted one last photo online, not to the family group, of course. That bridge was long burned. I posted it to my own wall, just me standing beside the plaque. No caption, just the image. The people who understood, understood. And the ones who didn't, they weren't invited to ask. 2 weeks later, a card came in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. I recognized the handwriting right away. It was from Marcus. He didn't beg. He didn't make excuses. He simply wrote, I've been thinking about how long you kept showing up for us and how little we showed up for you. You didn't deserve what we did. I know it's too late to ask for forgiveness, but if you ever want to have coffee, just coffee, no promises, I'll be there. Love, Marcus. I folded the letter slowly and placed it in a drawer. I didn't write back. Maybe one day I will, but I needed him to sit with the silence, to taste it the same way I had when they left me by the window, cornbread in the fridge, blazer on, waiting for a car that never came. Redemption takes time and effort and loss. I'm not bitter. I'm just done being the one who always does the reaching. Christmas came. I spent it at the foundation, just like I said I would. We had a little tree, some carols, a warm dinner, and enough laughter to fill the rooms with something that felt like family. The good kind. The kind that doesn't ask you to shrink. I brought my cornbread again. This time it was eaten. Every last crumb. As the evening wound down, I sat beside a man named Frank who told me his son had dropped him off at a bus station 3 years ago. Still don't know why, he said. He just said, wait here. I'll be back. And never came. He smiled as he told it, but his eyes stayed watery. I'm sorry, I said. I'm not, he replied. I wouldn't have met these fellas if he hadn't. We raised our coffee cups in a quiet little toast. To beginnings, I said. To peace, he replied. When I got home that night, I looked around my living room. Same furniture, same old curtains, but everything felt new. The silence was mine now, chosen, owned, peaceful. I settled into my recliner with a blanket and lit one last candle. This one gold, flickering softly on the coffee table. I didn't wait for anyone to call. I didn't refresh my phone. I didn't wonder what Sandra or David or Marcus were doing. I already knew they were looking backward. And I was finally, beautifully done doing the same. Let them scroll. Let them explain. Let them live with the echo of their choices. I had found my peace, and it had nothing to do with them. The months that followed brought a steady stream of small victories. The Veterans Heritage Foundation received a surge of donations after my story went viral. They were able to open a second facility across town. Local businesses started reaching out, offering job training programs for the veterans staying there. I became something I never expected, a voice for forgotten fathers, grandfathers, and veterans who had been pushed aside by the very families they'd sacrificed for. A documentary filmmaker reached out, wanting to tell my story as part of a larger piece about elder abandonment. I agreed, but only on one condition: any proceeds would go to the foundation. When the documentary aired 6 months later, it sparked a national conversation. Support groups formed in other cities. Laws were proposed to protect elderly people from financial abuse by family members. David tried to reach out after the documentary aired. He left a voicemail: "Dad, I saw the film. I understand now. Can we please talk?" I saved the message but didn't return the call. Understanding and earning forgiveness were two different things. Marcus, on the other hand, kept his distance but found other ways to show he was changing. I heard through mutual friends that he'd started volunteering at a different veterans organization in his city. He never mentioned my name or tried to capitalize on our connection. He just served quietly. That meant more to me than any apology could. 1 year after that terrible Thanksgiving, I received an unexpected visitor. Patricia from the foundation knocked on my door, but she wasn't alone. Behind her stood a young woman I didn't recognize. "Harold, I'd like you to meet Jennifer," Patricia said. "She's a social worker who specializes in family reconciliation. She's been working with some of our residents who want to reconnect with family members who've hurt them." Jennifer stepped forward. "Mr. Thompson, I've heard your story. I work with families who are trying to heal from situations like yours. I don't advocate for forgiveness where it's not earned, but I do help people navigate what healing looks like when both sides are genuinely ready." I invited them in for coffee. Jennifer explained that she'd been contacted by Marcus through the veterans organization where he volunteered. He'd been seeing a counselor for 8 months and wanted to know if there was a way to earn back even a small piece of my trust. "He's not asking for immediate forgiveness," Jennifer said. He's asking for a roadmap, a way to prove he's changed, if you're willing to give him that chance. I thought about it for a long time. What would that look like? It would start small. Maybe a letter exchange through me as a mediator. No pressure for face-to-face contact until you feel ready. And only if his actions prove he's serious about change. I agreed to one letter. A week later, Jennifer brought me an envelope. Inside was 3 pages, handwritten, from Marcus. It wasn't full of excuses or pleas for instant forgiveness. Instead, it was a detailed account of the work he'd been doing on himself, the counseling sessions, the volunteer work, the ways he was trying to understand the pain he'd caused. He wrote, "I know I can't undo the silence when you needed me to speak up. I can't undo the laughter when I should have defended you. But I'm learning to be the kind of man who would never let those things happen again. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know that your pain changed me." I wrote back. 1 page. Simple, actions speak louder than words. Keep doing the work. We'll see where it leads. That exchange continued for 3 months. Marcus never pushed for more. He just shared updates on his volunteer work, his counseling sessions, and the ways he was trying to be better, not just to me, but to everyone in his life. Meanwhile, David had grown increasingly desperate. He'd shown up at the foundation twice, demanding to see me. Patricia had him escorted off the property both times. He'd tried to contact my lawyer, my neighbors, even my doctor, looking for a way to reach me. His messages became more erratic. "Dad, you're destroying our family. People are saying terrible things about us. This has gone too far." He never once said he was sorry. It became clear that David's concern wasn't about making things right, it was about making things look right. He wanted the controversy to go away, wanted his reputation restored, wanted things to go back to how they were. But there was no going back. Sandra, I learned, had left him. The stress of the public scrutiny, combined with David's inability to take responsibility for his actions, had finally pushed her to her breaking point. She'd moved back to her mother's house and filed for divorce. David was alone now, living in the same house where they'd planned that perfect Thanksgiving without me. Poetic justice, I thought. As winter turned to spring, Marcus asked through Jennifer if he could visit the Veterans Foundation, not to see me, but to volunteer there as well. He wanted to understand the work they were doing, the people they were helping. I agreed, with conditions. He would work with different residents than I did, we wouldn't interact during his volunteer hours, and if I felt uncomfortable at any point, he would step back. For 6 months, we worked in the same building without speaking. But I watched him. I saw how he interacted with the veterans, with respect, with patience, with genuine care. He listened to their stories without trying to fix them. He helped with small tasks without seeking recognition. One day, I was helping Frank, the man from Christmas dinner, fill out some paperwork when Marcus walked by. Frank looked up and said, "That young man reminds me of my grandson. Same gentle way about him." I almost smiled. Finally, after a year of letter exchanges and parallel volunteer work, I agreed to meet Marcus face to face. Jennifer arranged it in a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop downtown. He looked different. Older, more serious, but also more genuine. The arrogance that had once clung to him was gone. "Thank you for giving me this chance," he said. "I'm not giving you anything," I replied. "You're earning it." He nodded. "I know." We talked for an hour. He didn't make excuses for his past behavior. He didn't blame Sandra or David or anyone else. He just took responsibility and shared how he was working to be better. At the end of our conversation, I said, "This doesn't fix everything. I know. And it doesn't mean we're back to how things were." "I wouldn't want that," he said. "How things were wasn't good enough." That surprised me. As I drove home that day, I realized something had shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, but possibility. The possibility that relationships could be rebuilt on new foundations. The possibility that people could actually change. The possibility that families could heal, even after they'd been broken. Marcus and I began meeting monthly. Always in public, always brief, always focused on moving forward rather than relieving the past. Slowly, carefully, we started building something new, not a grandfather and grandson relationship, but two men who respected each other trying to find common ground. David, meanwhile, had hit rock bottom. He'd been fired from his job after a customer complaint about his attitude went viral. Someone had recognized him from my documentary. His divorce was finalized. His friends had distanced themselves. He sent me one final letter, but not through Jennifer. He hand-delivered it to my door, leaving it in my mailbox late at night. It was different from his previous attempts at contact. Raw, desperate, but finally honest. Dad, I've lost everything. My job, my wife, my friends, my reputation. And I deserve it. I was cruel to you. I was selfish and entitled, and I hurt the one person who never deserved it. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect a response. I just needed you to know that I finally understand what I did. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I read it twice, then put it in my desk drawer next to Marcus's letters. 2 years after that terrible Thanksgiving, the Veterans Heritage Foundation held a ceremony to dedicate their new wing, the Harold Thompson Memorial Wing, named not because I was dead, but because I had given them new life. Marcus attended the ceremony. David did not. As I cut the ribbon, surrounded by veterans who had become my chosen family, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. I'd lost a son but gained dozens of brothers. I'd lost financial security but gained something more valuable, self-respect. During my speech that day, I said, sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is consequences for their actions. Not out of cruelty, but out of love. Because people can't change if they never face the cost of staying the same. The audience applauded, but my eyes found Marcus in the crowd. He was crying, not from sadness, but from understanding. After the ceremony, he approached me. "Grandpa," he said, the first time he'd used that word since everything happened. "I want you to know that what you did, calling us out, changing your will, refusing to enable our behavior, it saved me. I was becoming someone terrible, and you stopped me." I looked at this young man who had grown into someone I could respect. "You saved yourself," I said. "I just refused to make it easy for you to stay the same." That night, I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee and looked at the stars. Tomorrow, Marcus and I would volunteer together at the foundation, working side by side for the first time. It wasn't the relationship we'd had before, but it was the relationship we'd earned. As for David, well, some bridges can't be rebuilt. Some consequences can't be undone. Some people have to live with the choices they've made. I'd learned to be at peace with that. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, "Thank you for not giving up on the possibility that I could be better." I smiled and typed back, "Thank you for proving me right." The years that followed brought unexpected joys. Marcus met a woman named Sarah at the Veterans Foundation. She was a nurse who volunteered there on weekends. Their relationship was built on service and genuine care for others, not the superficial attractions that had defined his past relationships. When they got engaged, Marcus asked if I would walk Sarah down the aisle. Her father had passed away years earlier. I was honored to do it. At their wedding, I sat in the front row, not because of obligation or tradition, but because I had earned that place through years of rebuilt trust. In my pocket was the original will I'd written for Marcus, the one I'd cut up that night after Thanksgiving. I'd had Robert recreate it, with some modifications. Marcus would inherit my personal belongings in a modest trust fund, but the bulk of my estate would still go to the foundation. Marcus knew this and approved. "I don't want your money, Grandpa," he told me. "I want your respect. And I want to keep earning it." David never reached out again after that final letter. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd moved to another state, was working construction, living a quiet life. Part of me hoped he'd found some peace. But I'd stopped waiting for his redemption. On my 80th birthday, the Veterans Foundation threw me a party. The room was full of men I'd helped, staff members who'd become friends, and Marcus with his new wife. It was the birthday party I'd always dreamed of, surrounded by people who chose to be there, not out of obligation, but out of love. As I blew out the candles, I made a wish. Not for forgiveness from those who'd wronged me, not for a return to how things used to be, but for continued strength to keep building the life I'd chosen, a life based on mutual respect, earned trust, and chosen family. Later that evening, Marcus pulled me aside. "Grandpa, Sarah and I have some news," he said, grinning. "You're going to be a great-grandfather." For the first time in years, I cried tears of pure joy. 6 months later, I held my great-granddaughter, Emma, in my arms. She was perfect, tiny fingers wrapped around mine, eyes that seemed to see straight through to my soul. "She's going to know stories about her great-grandfather," Marcus said. "Real stories. About a man who stood up for himself when it mattered. About a man who chose dignity over convenience. About a man who taught his family what respect really means." I looked down at Emma and whispered, "And I'm going to make sure you never forget that you're worthy of that respect too." That night, I updated my will one final time. The foundation would still receive the bulk of my estate, but I established a college fund for Emma and any future great-grandchildren. Not because I owed them anything, but because they would be raised to understand the difference between entitlement and earned gifts. I also wrote letters, one for Emma to read when she turns 18, one for Marcus to read after I'm gone, and yes, even one for David, should he ever find his way back to being the son I once knew. But mostly, I wrote for myself. A record of how a man can lose everything and still find himself. How dignity can't be taken, only given away. How family isn't determined by blood, but by who shows up when it matters. As I finished writing, the sun was rising outside my window. Another day, another chance to live with integrity, another opportunity to choose respect over convenience. I was Harold Thompson. I was 80 years old. I had lost a son but found myself. I had given away a fortune but gained something priceless, a life lived on my own terms. And I was finally, completely at peace with that. The cornbread recipe I'd used for so many Thanksgivings was now printed in the Foundation's cookbook, sold to raise funds for their programs. Next to it was my photo and a quote, "The secret ingredient was always love. But love without respect is just flour and water, it doesn't rise." Every Thanksgiving since that terrible day 4 years ago, I've spent at the Foundation, surrounded by men who understand what it means to start over. We eat well, laugh often, and never take for granted the gift of being wanted where we are. This year, Marcus and Sarah brought Emma to join us. She's walking now, babbling constantly, lighting up every room she enters. When she saw me, she reached out her little arms and said, "Papa." It was the first time anyone had called me that. As I held her, watching the room full of veterans light up at her presence, I realized something profound. I hadn't just survived my family's betrayal, I had transformed it into something beautiful. The love I'd wasted on people who couldn't appreciate it had been redirected to people who treasured it. The legacy I'd almost left to ungrateful recipients was now changing lives every single day. Emma would grow up knowing her papa not as a man who was abandoned, but as a man who chose to stand up, speak out, and build something better from the ashes of disappointment. That night, as I tucked her into the portable crib Marcus had brought, she looked up at me with those wise baby eyes and smiled. "You're going to know what love really looks like," I whispered to her. "Not the kind that comes with conditions, but the kind that grows stronger when it's respected." She reached up and touched my face with her tiny hand, and in that moment, I knew my story had come full circle. Not back to where it started, but forward to where it was always meant to end, with love that was freely given and gratefully received. I was Harold Thompson. I had taken my stand, told my truth, and built my peace. And I was exactly where I belonged.